Hey guys, welcome back. In the last lecture, we worked on creating an API endpoint in Rails to save the question in the database. And we also tried this API successfully from both the Postman and React form. Now, in this lecture, we're going to implement a component to show the server side errors on the React form. We saw in the last lecture that when we are submitting a form with a blank question title or already existing title in the database, then the API returning the validation error. So now we need to show those errors on React form so that user can understand that why this question is or question submitted by him is not getting saved into the database. Okay. So let's start the implementation. To start the implementation, first switch to the project directory and open the new question component and add some states there. Okay. First of all, we need to check that if any server side error exists or not. Okay. By default, we can set this server side error presence as false because initially, I mean before the form submission, no error exists. So let's define our state for checking if server side error present or not. So we can add const, and here it's server side error, and then set is, and set the initial value to false. Okay, save this. So here you can see is server side error, and then set is server side error. It is a boolean value. Okay, and now if the API returns the validation errors, then we need to store them in some state so that we can display such errors on our form. So that let's define, here we can define, let's say const and server errors, and then set server errors. Here define an empty array, that is, let's say, why I'm using array here, because if you see on the postman that we, when the API fails, we are getting the data, we are getting the validation error messages into an array as the data key, and we are also getting one more key value pair, that is status, whether it is success or failed. Okay, now switch to the new question component again, and now into the function where we are sending post request, we need to check if API returns the status failure. Okay, or when the validation failed at the Rails level. Okay, so let's come to the create question function. Here you can see that in the create question function, we implemented this fetch API to send the post request. Okay, now if API returns the status failure, then what we need to do? We need to check if data dot status is failure. So we can add if data and fetch the key, that is status, is equal to failure. Okay, let me check whether it is, yeah, it is success, failure. And if this is, then we need to update our state variables that we are getting here, that is server side. So we can copy this set is server side, and here set it to true, because if there is failure, then it must be true. Okay, and the another one is set server errors, and it must be the data. Okay, data, and what is the key name in the data, that is data. Okay, so we are getting the validation error into the data key. Okay, into the response. Now, sorry, let me add else here. Okay, so now what we need to do in the else part, that suppose user fixed the error that he is getting from the server, like if user submitted the empty form, then he got the server side error and he provided a valid question. Okay, so when user submit the valid form, then all error must be gone, so we need to reset these states again. Okay, or you can say that we need to revert back these states to its initial value. So we can add set is server side error, that should be false now, and set server errors, and it should be an empty array again. Okay, so save this. Now we need to create a new component to display server side errors in the React form. Okay, so let's create a new component with the name server side error and implement it. So let's create a new component file first and name this as server side error dot jsx. and we can reuse this component throughout our application where we gonna show some react form, so we can use this component in the similar way. Okay, so here first you need to copy a few lines. So go to the top of the new question component, and here you can copy all these imports. So just paste it here, and now define our component. So const server side error. Okay, and here you need to accept some props from the new question component, so we can add props, and then just define an empty component and an empty return method into this. Okay, so return. Now let's export this component. Okay, so export default and then server side error. Save this, and now we need to import this component into the new question component. So switch to the new question component again and import this. So we just need to import it from, and then you can just provide this. So server side error. Okay, so we created our server side error, and we set up all the required states and updated into the fetch API call. Now what we need to do is the next thing, that we define our component. Now it's time to render this component into the model body. Okay, so let's switch to the return statement, return function of this new question component, and here inside the model body, first switch to here, and here what you need to provide. First, we need to check that if the server side error really exists. Okay, if server side error does not exist, then it does not make sense to render this component. Okay, so we need to check here is server side error. Okay, if this present, then we there only we will render this component. Okay, so cut this and render it like this. Okay, and here we need to pass some props as well. And what will be the props? So let's say errors, and here we need to provide our server errors. Server errors. Okay, so now we can render this component into our, sorry, now we can render the server side error component into the new question component. Okay, so we created the server side error component, and we imported into the new question, and we write the code to render this component as well. Now what we need to do, we need to finish the implementation of return method here. Okay, so we can use some fragment kind of syntax here. Okay, and now here we can provide, let's say, p class name and then lead and font weight bold, and here we can add, let's say, let's close this paragraph, and here we can add, please fix this errors, or please fix the following errors. Please fix the errors below. That's same, that is much better. Okay, and now what we need to do, we need to iterate our props dot errors. So we can use props dot errors dot map. Okay, and we also need to provide a key, because whenever we iterate something in map it operator or map iterator, then what we need to do, we need to provide a key value. But in the array we are just only getting the error messages, so now we need to use the indexing of this array as the key. So we will provide index of every error as the key to this element. Okay, so what we can add here, let's say error and then index. Okay, and now implement it further, and here you can add, say, p class name. Into this class what we need to provide, text danger. That's because we're going to show the errors. Okay, so text danger, and as the key you can provide the index here. Okay, so into the JSX syntax, let's use index, and then close this paragraph tag. Now here we need to display the error message, that is error. Okay, so save this. So we are all done, and it's time to save test this feature. So switch to the browser and refresh it first. Okay, so let's make a refresh to the browser, and now try by submitting the form with an empty question. Okay, so let's click on this contributor question button, and when you click on the submit question button, you will see that our server side error component is rendering here, that is please fix the error below, and we are seeing the error which is represented by or which is sent by the Rails API. Okay, so you can see that title cannot be blank. Okay, now let's try submitting a question that is already existing in the database, and you will see an error message for uniqueness. So let's copy this error. Okay, so just copy this, and now click on the contributor question and paste this question again, and when you click on submit question now, you will see another error, that is title has already been taken. Okay, but hold on, let's submit a valid question to see whether the error is not showing anymore now. Okay, I mean that if we submit a new question now that is valid and not exist in the database already, so this fix this error below and the title has already been taken should not be appear here. Or you can say that when we submit a valid question, then server side error does not need to be appear here. Okay, it should be removed. So let's provide a valid question, so we can add let's say how the binary search works. Okay, and you can select the tag, let's say data structure, and now submit the question. Okay, so when you submit the question, you can see that the server side error is not rendering here, and when you click when you check this on the console, you can see that a new question has been created, that is how the binary search works. Okay, so it is now submitted into the database, and when you submit this question again, you will see an error that title has already been taken and the transaction has been rolled back. Okay, now we are done with this. So what was our purpose for this lecture? To show the validation errors on the form, and we did that successfully. Okay, so let's give this lecture a try at your end and practice this as much as you can, because this is something that you might need to deal with frequently. Okay, especially if you have been asked to work on React forms. Okay, so thanks for watching this, and let's meet into the next lecture. Till then, tata, goodbye, take care, stay safe.